China has been creating problems under the leadership of Xi Jinping for its neighbors as well as people of its autonomous regions. But this time, to satisfy his ever-increasing ego, Xi Jinping has brought suffering on his own citizens in the mainland, as the shortages of high-quality Australian coal hits the country suddenly, courtesy China's decision to block all imports of Australian coal. Chinese authorities have been forced to limit the amount of electricity supply to many provinces. People in China are literally being rationed electricity, and their daily activities are being governed to a very minute level, so much so that provincial government agencies south of Shanghai were ordered to turn on the heat only if the temperature falls below 3 degrees Celsius, and even then, the thermostat can only be turned up to 16 degrees Celsius and not beyond that. This is more than enough of a proof to establish that China is facing acute coal shortages in its thermal power plants, and as winter arrives, it is not being able to manage the plummeting coal supply. However, if we move beyond the geopolitics, tens of millions of people are being subjected to brute communist diktats, reminiscing the dark ages under the rule of Mao Zedong. According to the Australian, power shortages are increasing in China, with millions of citizens resorting to rationing their heating over winter and avoiding using elevators. A Chinese energy insider told the publication, "You cannot pretend that bad relations between China and Australia haven't contributed to this situation. In 2019, Australia supplied the majority of China's thermal coal imports for power stations and more than 40% of the nation's imports of coking coal." And any number of times, the Chinese Communist Party tries to deny by presenting flawed and cooked-up statistics that the current crisis is not the result of the brutal dictatorial order to stop the import of Australian coal. This does not change facts on the ground. Desperate geopolitics and Xi Jinping's ego is driving China's terrible decision to reject Australian coal, but at an official level, the CCP claims that the rejections are being made due to Australia exhausting its export quotas and the current crisis being blown way out of proportion. However, the ground reality is completely different, and Chinese officials cannot accept it given the repercussions they will face for hurting the ego of Xi Jinping. Residents, factories and businesses in Hunan, Zhejiang and Jiangxi provinces have been hit badly with electricity shortage, and the administration of these provinces have ordered rationing of electricity in some areas, citing a shortfall in coal supplies, according to local media reports and government notices. As per news reports, posts on Weibo captured scenes of havoc from within China, including elevators that stopped in blacked-out office buildings, and all this as per government orders. The provincial governments too were caught off guard, and the top-down sudden order by Xi Jinping has hit the people and businesses alike. China is once again proving that the ego of Xi Jinping is more important than the suffering of the tens of millions of people facing power shortages in the winter conditions. Basically, the CCP is willing to sacrifice its people rather than accepting the mistakes of Xi Jinping. And thus, by forcing its citizens to bear long power cuts and not letting them use the heating, Xi Jinping is literally trying to be the next Mao Zedong and taking China back to the miserable days of the communist dictator.